Hey guys, tonight we're leaving Earth behind and taking a one-way trip to our closest celestial neighbor, the Moon. That pale, silent world that's been watching over us for billions of years, looking so peaceful and romantic from down here. But here's the thing about the Moon. It's not romantic. It's not peaceful. It's one of the most hostile, deadly environments in our solar system. And if you somehow found yourself standing on its surface tomorrow, you'd be dead before you could even appreciate the view of Earth hanging in that black sky above you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. But fair warning, by the end of this, you'll never look at the Moon the same way again. Picture this. You wake up, but instead of your bedroom ceiling, you're staring up at the deepest, blackest sky you've ever seen. No blue, no clouds, no atmosphere at all. Just the harsh, unforgiving void of space pressing down on you like a weight. And hanging there, impossibly large and impossibly blue, is Earth, your home. A marble of swirling white clouds and deep oceans. So beautiful, it makes your chest ache. And you're here, on this gray, lifeless rock, 240 miles away from everything you've ever known. The surface beneath you is covered in a fine, talcum powder dust that's been ground down over billions of years by micrometeorites. There are no footprints here except your own, and maybe those left by the Apollo astronauts decades ago, still perfectly preserved because there's no wind, no weather, nothing to erase them. The silence is absolute. Not just quiet, absolutely, utterly silent. Sound doesn't travel in a vacuum, so even if you screamed at the top of your lungs, you wouldn't hear it. The only sounds you'd experience would be the vibrations traveling through your body, your heartbeat, your breathing, the creaking of your bones. But here's the thing. You wouldn't be breathing for long, because the Moon doesn't have an atmosphere. None at all. Just a whisper-thin layer of particles so sparse it might as well not exist. And that means the vacuum of space is pressing against every inch of your body with a force that wants to tear you apart from the inside out. Let's talk about what happens to a human body in the vacuum of space. Because it's not what you think. Hollywood has lied to you. You won't explode like a balloon. You won't freeze instantly. But what will happen is much, much worse. First, the air in your lungs will expand rapidly. If you try to hold your breath, your lungs will rupture like overfilled balloons, filling your chest cavity with blood and air bubbles that will find their way into your bloodstream. So your first instinct, to hold your breath, will kill you faster than if you just exhaled and accepted your fate. Next comes ebulism. It sounds medical and clean, but it's horrifying. The low pressure causes the water in your saliva, tears, and mucous membranes to literally boil. Not from heat, from the lack of pressure. Your tongue will bubble and swell. Your eyes will bulge as the moisture on them starts to vaporize. Your skin will stretch and expand as the dissolved gases in your blood come out of solution, forming bubbles under your skin like some nightmare version of bubble wrap. You'll have about 15 seconds of useful consciousness before your brain shuts down from oxygen deprivation. But here's the cruel part. You probably won't die from asphyxiation first. You'll likely succumb to the arterial gas embolism. Those bubbles in your blood will reach your heart and brain, causing what amounts to a stroke and heart attack simultaneously. The whole process takes about 1 to 2 minutes. 2 minutes of the most unimaginable agony as your body betrays you in ways evolution never prepared you for. And that's assuming you're lucky enough to die quickly from the vacuum. Because if somehow you survive that initial assault, the moon has plenty of other ways to kill you. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you're wearing a spacesuit. Congratulations. You've just extended your life expectancy from 2 minutes to maybe a few hours. But the moon isn't done with you yet, not even close. The temperature on the moon is trying to kill you in 2 different ways, depending on where you are and what time it island. During the lunar day, which lasts about 14 Earth days, temperatures can reach 250 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to boil water. Your spacesuit's cooling system will be working overtime, pumping coolant through tubes woven into your undergarments, desperately trying to keep your core temperature from cooking you alive. But the lunar night is even worse. For 2 weeks of darkness, temperatures plummet to negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit. That's colder than liquid nitrogen. Your spacesuit's heating elements will drain your battery at an alarming rate. And if they fail, you'll freeze solid in minutes. Your blood will crystallize in your veins. Your organs will become brittle like glass. And here's the thing about those temperature extremes. They're not gradual. When you cross from the sunlit side to the shadow side of a boulder or crater rim, you can experience a temperature swing of 500 degrees in a single step. Your suit's thermal regulation system will be pushed to its absolute limits, and thermal regulation systems fail. They fail more often than anyone wants to admit. But even if your suit's life support systems work perfectly, even if the heating and cooling keep you at exactly 98.6 degrees, you're still being bombarded by radiation that's slowly cooking you from the inside out. Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect us from the worst of space radiation. But the moon has no magnetic field and no atmosphere. You're completely exposed to cosmic rays, solar radiation, and solar particle events that would be lethal even over short periods. Cosmic rays are high-energy particles racing through the galaxy at nearly the speed of light. They slam into your body with such force that they can shatter DNA, damage your central nervous system, and increase your cancer risk exponentially. Astronauts on the International Space Station, protected by Earth's magnetic field, still receive radiation doses equivalent to getting several chest X-rays every day. On the moon, that exposure increases by a factor of 10. But cosmic rays are the least of your worries. Solar particle events are much worse. When the sun has a bad day and throws a tantrum, it can blast charged particles into space at millions of miles per hour. On Earth, our magnetosphere deflects most of this radiation. On the moon, you take the full hit. During a major solar particle event, an unprotected human would receive a lethal dose of radiation in minutes. Even inside a spacesuit, you'd absorb enough radiation to cause acute radiation syndrome, radiation poisoning that would kill you within days or weeks, assuming you lived that long. The symptoms start with nausea and vomiting. Then comes the diarrhea, as your digestive system begins to shut down. Your immune system collapses, leaving you vulnerable to any infection. Your hair falls out in clumps. Your skin develops radiation burns that look like the worst sunburn you can imagine. But they go much deeper, killing tissue layer by layer. Eventually, your bone marrow stops producing blood cells. You become anemic. Then, your blood stops clotting properly. You'll bleed internally from damaged blood vessels and externally from any small cut or scrape. Death comes from a combination of infection, blood loss, and organ failure. And all the while, you're still on the moon, still trying to survive in an environment that wants you dead in a dozen different ways. Let's talk about lunar dust, because it might be the moon's most insidious killer. It doesn't look dangerous, just a fine, gray powder that covers everything like a soft blanket. But lunar dust is nothing like Earth dust. It's made of tiny glass fragments that have been created by billions of years of micrometeorite impacts. Each particle is essentially microscopic broken glass, razor-sharp and electrostatically charged. On Earth, dust particles get worn smooth by wind and water. But the moon has no weather, so every grain of lunar dust retains its sharp, jagged edges. It's like living in a world made of powdered glass and asbestos. The dust gets into everything. It sticks to your spacesuit with an almost magnetic attraction. It clogs filters, gums up moving parts, and works its way into every seal and joint. The Apollo astronauts discovered that it was nearly impossible to brush off, and it abraded their spacesuits like sandpaper. But the real danger comes when you breathe it in. And you will breathe it in, because it's impossible to completely seal a habitat against lunar dust. It's so fine that it behaves almost like a gas, seeping through the tiniest gaps and cracks. Once in your lungs, lunar dust does what asbestos does, but worse. The sharp particles embed in your lung tissue and can't be cleared by your body's natural defenses. They cause inflammation, scarring, and eventually lung cancer. The Apollo astronauts who spent just a few days on the moon reported symptoms similar to hay fever, runny noses, sneezing, throat irritation. They were literally breathing powdered glass. Imagine spending days, weeks, or months constantly inhaling microscopic razor blades. Your lungs would slowly fill with scar tissue until every breath became a struggle. You develop what's essentially lunar pneumoconiosis, a lung disease that would slowly suffocate you from the inside out. But even if you could somehow avoid breathing the dust, even if you could seal yourself in a perfect habitat with perfect air filtration, the moon would still find ways to kill you. Because living in 1/6 gravity isn't the fun, bouncy experience you might imagine. It's a slow-motion disaster for your body. Your bones need stress to stay strong. On Earth, just standing up and walking around puts enough stress on your skeleton to keep your bones dense and healthy. But in lunar gravity, that stress is reduced by 83%. Your bones begin to dissolve. It starts within days. Your body begins to break down bone tissue and dump the calcium into your bloodstream. Your bones become brittle, porous, fragile. After just a few months on the moon, your skeleton would be so weakened that a simple fall could shatter your hip or spine. And it's not just your bones. Your muscles atrophy without the constant work of fighting Earth's gravity. Your heart, which is essentially a muscle, begins to weaken. Your cardiovascular system adapts to the lower gravity by becoming less efficient. Blood pools in your upper body instead of being properly circulated. Your balance and spatial orientation, calibrated by millions of years of evolution in Earth gravity, become unreliable. You become clumsy, prone to falls and accidents. And on the moon, where every surface is hard rock covered in sharp dust, where your spacesuit is your only protection from instant death, being clumsy isn't just inconvenient, it's fatal. Your inner ear, which helps you maintain balance, becomes confused by the altered gravity. You experience something like constant motion sickness. You become disoriented, nauseous, unable to judge distances or the force needed for simple tasks. You might push too hard trying to open a valve and break it. You might misjudge a jump and crash into equipment. Every action becomes a potential disaster. And let's not forget about your spine. On Earth, gravity compresses your spine throughout the day, and you literally shrink slightly by evening. In space or on the moon, your spine elongates as the reduced gravity allows your vertebrae to spread apart. This sounds beneficial, but it causes chronic back pain and can pinch nerves. Astronauts on long-duration missions frequently report severe back problems that persist long after they return to Earth. But perhaps the most insidious effect of long-term lunar living would be on your brain. Recent studies of astronauts have shown that prolonged exposure to microgravity and space radiation can cause actual brain damage. The white matter in your brain begins to deteriorate. Your cognitive function declines. You have trouble concentrating, making decisions, forming memories. This isn't just temporary disorientation. It's actual neurological damage that may be permanent. Imagine slowly losing your intelligence, your memory, your ability to think clearly, all while trapped in the most dangerous environment humans have ever encountered. Now let's talk about water. Because on the moon, water is more precious than gold, more vital than oxygen, and almost impossible to obtain or keep. Water on the moon exists primarily as ice in permanently shadowed craters at the poles. These aren't just cold places. They're some of the coldest spots in the solar system, colder than the surface of Pluto. The ice there has been frozen for billions of years, never touched by sunlight. Mixed with frozen carbon dioxide and other compounds that would be toxic if consumed. To get to this water, you'd have to travel hundreds of miles across some of the most treacherous terrain in the solar system, carrying all your life support with you, then somehow extract ice from rock-hard frozen soil in a place where your equipment would become so brittle from the cold that it would shatter like glass. But let's say you somehow manage to extract some ice. Melting it requires energy, and energy is in desperately short supply on the moon. Every watt of power is precious. When your life support systems are constantly running at maximum capacity just to keep you alive. And even if you can melt the ice, you have to purify it. Lunar ice isn't pure H2O. It's mixed with all sorts of compounds that have been deposited by billions of years of comet and asteroid impacts. Some of these compounds are poisonous. Others are carcinogenic. Drinking unpurified lunar water would be like drinking a cocktail of industrial chemicals. Then there's the problem of storage. Water expands when it freezes. And on the moon, anything not actively heated will freeze solid. Your water storage tanks need to be constantly heated, which drains your power supplies even faster. If your heating system fails, your water supply turns into ice that could burst your storage containers, leaving you with nothing. The average human needs about 2 liters of water per day just for drinking. That doesn't include water for cleaning, food preparation, or hygiene. And every drop is irreplaceable. There's no rain on the moon, no rivers, no groundwater. Once your water is gone, it's gone. Recycling water becomes a matter of life and death. Every drop of urine, every bit of moisture from your breath and sweat has to be recaptured, purified, and reused. The life support systems required for this are incredibly complex and prone to failure. When they break down, you die of thirst while surrounded by the vacuum of space. Food presents its own unique challenges on the moon. Everything you eat has to be brought from Earth or grown in pressurized habitats using artificial soil and artificial atmosphere. The energy requirements for growing food in such an environment are enormous, and the failure rate is high. Imagine your crops failing on the moon. There's no backup plan, no emergency supply run to the grocery store. When your food runs out, you starve. And starvation on the moon isn't like starvation on Earth. The stress of living in a hostile environment accelerates your metabolism. You burn more calories just staying alive. You need more food, not less. Preserved foods break down differently in the radiation environment of the moon. Cosmic rays can break down vitamins and proteins, turning nutritious food into worthless or even harmful substances. Your carefully planned meals become inadequate, leaving you malnourished even when you're getting enough calories. And then there's the psychological aspect of eating the same recycled, processed foods day after day, week after week. With no possibility of fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, or any of the foods you've enjoyed your entire life. The monotony becomes a form of torture that slowly breaks down your mental health. Speaking of mental health, let's discuss what isolation on the moon does to your mind, because the psychological effects might kill you faster than the physical ones. The moon is the loneliest place a human being has ever been. You're nearly 250,000 miles from every other human being who has ever lived. The Earth, with everyone you've ever loved, is just a small blue dot in the black sky. There's no possibility of rescue if something goes wrong. No possibility of going home if you change your mind. You are truly, utterly alone. The silence is oppressive. On Earth, we're constantly surrounded by sounds, traffic, birds, wind, other people. These sounds connect us to life, to activity, to the world around us. On the moon, there is only silence. The kind of absolute silence that makes you question whether you still exist. The landscape never changes. It's the same gray dust, the same ancient craters, the same black sky every day. There are no seasons, no weather, no cycles of nature to mark the passage of time. Days and nights are 2 weeks long each, creating a disorienting rhythm that your circadian rhythms can't adapt to. The psychological pressure of knowing that everything around you is trying to kill you becomes overwhelming. You're surrounded by vacuum, radiation, temperature extremes, and toxic dust. Your life depends on machinery that could fail at any moment. Every sound your equipment makes, every unusual vibration, every unexpected warning light could be the beginning of your death. Sleep becomes nearly impossible. How do you relax when you know that a single seal failure, a single crack in your habitat, means instant death? How do you rest when you're constantly listening for the sounds that might indicate your life support is failing? Astronauts on short moon missions reported feeling constantly on edge, hyper-alert, unable to truly rest. They described a constant low-level anxiety that never went away, a persistent awareness of danger that exhausted them mentally and physically. The absence of normal human interaction becomes torture. You can communicate with Earth, but there's a delay. Radio signals take nearly 3 seconds to travel between Earth and Moon. Conversations become awkward, stilted, unnatural. You can't have a normal phone call with your loved ones. Every exchange is punctuated by delays, by the constant reminder of how far away you are. And what happens when the communication system fails? What happens when that last connection to humanity is severed, leaving you alone with your thoughts in the most hostile environment imaginable? Historical accounts from the Apollo astronauts, who spent only a few days on the Moon, describe profound psychological effects. They reported feeling disconnected from humanity, experiencing a kind of existential crisis brought on by seeing Earth from space. Some developed depression that lasted for years after their return, and they were heroes, trained professionals who knew they were going home. Imagine the psychological impact of being stranded there, of knowing you'll never see another human face, never feel wind or rain, never experience any of the sensory inputs that make us human. The mind begins to fracture under such isolation. Hallucinations become common, decision-making becomes impaired. The will to survive begins to erode. But even if you could somehow maintain your sanity, even if you could endure the isolation and the constant fear, the Moon has more subtle ways to kill you. Let's talk about micrometeorites, tiny fragments of rock and metal that rain down on the lunar surface constantly, moving at speeds of up to 45 miles per second. On Earth, these particles burn up in our atmosphere, creating the shooting stars we find so beautiful. But the Moon has no atmosphere to protect it. Every micrometeorite that heads toward the lunar surface hits it at full cosmic velocity. Most micrometeorites are tiny, smaller than grains of sand. But at 45 miles per second, even a particle the size of a pebble carries enormous kinetic energy. It hits with the force of a bullet. A micrometeorite the size of a marble could punch straight through a spacesuit, through your body, and out the other side. The Apollo astronauts were incredibly lucky. None of them were hit by significant micrometeorite impacts during their brief stays on the Moon. But the longer you stay on the lunar surface, the higher your chances of taking a hit. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Your spacesuit and habitat are constantly being peppered by these tiny projectiles. They create microscopic holes that can slowly leak atmosphere. They damage seals, crack faceplates, and gradually degrade all your equipment. Even if they don't kill you outright, they slowly compromise all the systems keeping you alive. The sound of micrometeorites hitting your habitat would be a constant reminder of the danger. Tiny pings and ticks as particles impact the walls around you, each one a potential death sentence if it hits the wrong spot. And then there are the larger impacts. Meteorites the size of your fist hit the Moon regularly. They create craters, throw up clouds of debris, and generate seismic waves that can be felt across the lunar surface. If you're unlucky enough to be near one of these impacts, the debris field alone could shred your spacesuit like tissue paper. Your equipment begins failing from the constant bombardment. Solar panels develop holes that reduce their efficiency. Computer systems malfunction from radiation damage and particle impacts. Seals and gaskets wear out faster in the harsh environment. The constant vibration from impacts loosens bolts and connections. Everything on the Moon operates at the edge of failure, and the margin for error is zero. When something breaks, you can't call for a repair technician. You have to fix it yourself, with whatever tools and spare parts you have on hand, while wearing bulky gloves in a spacesuit that makes fine motor control nearly impossible. Let's talk about those spacesuits, because they're marvels of engineering that are also death traps waiting to spring. A spacesuit is essentially a personal spacecraft, a life support system you wear. It has to maintain proper pressure, temperature, and atmosphere, while protecting you from radiation, micrometeorites, and temperature extremes. It's incredibly complex, with hundreds of components that all have to work perfectly, all the time. The suits, worn by Apollo astronauts, weighed about 180 pounds on Earth, but only 30 pounds on the Moon due to the lower gravity. Even so, they were bulky, restrictive, and exhausting to work in. The astronauts reported that simple tasks took much longer and required much more effort than they would on Earth. The life support backpack contains fans, pumps, filters, batteries, and communication equipment. All of it has to work perfectly. If the fan that circulates air through your suit fails, carbon dioxide builds up and you suffocate within minutes. If the pump that circulates cooling water fails, you overheat and die. If the battery fails, all your systems shut down and you have perhaps minutes to get back to your habitat. The suit itself is made of multiple layers of different materials, each serving a specific purpose. The innermost layer is a pressure bladder that keeps the suit inflated. If it develops even a tiny hole, you have only seconds to find and patch it before the suit deflates and exposes you to the vacuum of space. The outer layers protect against micrometeorites and radiation, but they're also vulnerable to tears, punctures, and abrasion from the lunar dust. The joints where different parts of the suit connect are particularly vulnerable. They're under constant stress and are difficult to seal perfectly. The helmet is perhaps the most critical component. It protects your head and contains your air supply, but it's also a potential trap. If the faceplate cracks, if the seals fail, if the anti-fog system malfunctions, you could be blinded or killed instantly. And here's the terrifying part. You're completely dependent on this complex, failure-prone system for every moment you spend outside your habitat. There's no backup, no safety net. When the suit fails, and it will eventually fail, you die. The psychological pressure of wearing a spacesuit adds another layer of stress. You're essentially sealed inside a personal tomb, dependent on mechanical systems for every breath. The constant hiss of fans and pumps becomes the soundtrack of your life. Any unexpected sound, any change in the normal rhythm of your life support, could be the first sign of catastrophic failure. Moving in a pressurized suit is like trying to work while wearing an inflated balloon. The suit wants to maintain its shape, resisting your every movement. Simple tasks become incredibly difficult. Your range of motion is severely limited. You fatigue quickly from fighting against the suit's pressure, and if you fall while wearing a spacesuit on the Moon, the consequences can be catastrophic. The suit is rigid when pressurized, so you can't break your fall naturally. You hit the ground hard, potentially damaging the suit's life support systems or creating holes in the outer layers. A fall that would be minor on Earth could be fatal on the Moon. Now let's discuss what happens when your equipment starts to fail. Because on the Moon, Murphy's Law isn't just an inconvenience, it's a death sentence. Everything mechanical breaks down eventually. The harsh environment of the Moon accelerates this process dramatically. Temperature cycling, Going from extreme heat to extreme cold repeatedly causes metals to expand and contract, creating fatigue failures in critical components. Radiation damages electronics, causing computers to malfunction and sensors to give false readings. The lunar dust is particularly destructive to moving parts. It's so fine that it penetrates seals and bearings, acting like abrasive paste that gradually wears away mechanical components. Motors burn out, pumps seize up, and filters clog much faster than they would on Earth. Let's start with your primary life support system, the Environmental Control and Life Support System, or ECLSS. This is the heart of your survival. A complex network of pumps, fans, filters, and chemical processes that keeps you alive. It's also incredibly fragile and prone to failure in ways that will kill you slowly and painfully. The oxygen generation system uses electrolysis to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The electrolysis cells are delicate, requiring precise voltage and current control. When cosmic radiation damages the control circuits, the cells can overheat and fail catastrophically, sometimes exploding and filling your habitat with toxic gases. The carbon dioxide scrubbing system relies on lithium hydroxide canisters or regenerative amine systems to remove the CO2 you exhale. These systems are sensitive to humidity and temperature variations. When the humidity control fails, which it inevitably will, moisture condenses in the wrong places, causing corrosion and blockages. The chemical reactions that remove CO2 can produce dangerous byproducts when the system operates outside normal parameters. When your oxygen recycling system fails, you have hours at most to repair it before the CO2 builds up to lethal levels. But the repair process itself is a nightmare. You have to shut down the system to work on it, which means COTO levels are rising while you work. Your hands shake from both stress and the early effects of CO2 poisoning, headaches, confusion, difficulty concentrating. The replacement parts for these systems are incredibly complex. You're not just changing a filter, you're trying to rebuild a molecular sieve bed or replace a palladium catalyst while wearing bulky gloves that make fine motor control nearly impossible. The instructions are technical manuals, hundreds of pages long, but you don't have time to study them carefully. Water recycling presents its own unique horrors when it fails. The system has to process not just drinking water, but water recovered from your urine, sweat, and even the moisture in your breath. When it breaks down, you're faced with increasingly desperate choices about what to drink. The distillation units have heating elements that burn out from constant use. The filtration systems clog with biological matter and chemical precipitates. The UV sterilization lamps fail, leaving you with water that might be contaminated with bacteria or viruses that could kill you just as surely as dehydration. When the main water recycling system fails, you might be forced to drink water that's only partially processed. Water that tastes of urine and chemicals. Water that makes you sick, but is better than dying of thirst. The psychological impact of drinking your own processed waste, knowing it might not be properly purified, adds another layer of horror to an already desperate situation. The heating and cooling systems are equally critical and equally fragile. The thermal control system uses a complex network of heat exchangers, pumps, and radiators to maintain livable temperatures. When a pump fails during lunar night, you have minutes to restore heating before hypothermia sets in. The cooling system works by circulating coolant through radiators that reject heat to space. But these radiators are exposed to micrometeorite bombardment and gradually develop leaks. When a leak occurs, you lose coolant, and the remaining coolant becomes less effective at removing heat. During lunar day, you face the horrible choice of rationing cooling to conserve what coolant remains, or running the system at full capacity and risking total coolant loss. The tools available for repairs are limited by what you can carry and what will function in the lunar environment. Many adhesives don't work in vacuum. Others become brittle in the cold or degrade under radiation. Lubricants either freeze solid or evaporate away, leaving moving parts to seize up and fail. Electronic diagnostic equipment may fail due to radiation or temperature extremes. The multimeters, oscilloscopes, and circuit analyzers you need to troubleshoot complex electronic systems may give false readings or fail completely when you need them most. You're forced to diagnose problems by symptoms alone, guessing at root causes while precious time ticks away. Soldering becomes nearly impossible in a spacesuit. The fine motor control required to make electrical connections is almost impossible with thick gloves. The soldering iron doesn't heat properly in vacuum, and solder doesn't flow the same way without convection. Every electrical repair becomes a frustrating battle against the limitations of working in an environment that wasn't designed for human hands. And you're trying to perform these complex repairs while wearing a bulky spacesuit, possibly in the dark, under extreme time pressure, knowing that failure means death. Your hands shake from stress, making fine motor control nearly impossible. You drop screws that float away in the low gravity, lost forever in the dust. The spare parts you have are finite. When they're gone, they're gone. There's no supply chain, no overnight delivery, no emergency repair service. You brought what you could carry, but you couldn't anticipate every possible failure mode. Critical components that seem reliable fail in unexpected ways, and you don't have replacements. You start cannibalizing non-critical systems to keep vital ones running. You remove fans from unused areas to replace failed fans in the life support system. You strip wiring from communication equipment to repair the electrical system that powers your air recycling. Each cannibalization makes your overall system more fragile and less redundant. The repair manuals you brought assume you have a full workshop, proper tools, and unlimited spare parts. The procedures don't account for improvisation with jury-rigged components and makeshift tools. You're forced to adapt procedures designed for Earth-based facilities to the harsh realities of lunar maintenance. As systems fail one by one, you're forced to make increasingly desperate choices. Do you shut down heating to preserve power for the oxygen recycling system? Do you risk going outside in a damaged spacesuit to repair a solar panel? Each decision brings you closer to the edge of survival. Your habitat's computer systems start failing as radiation damage accumulates in the memory chips and processors. The software that controls your life support begins producing errors, shutting down systems randomly or running them outside safe parameters. You try to reboot the computers, but the backup systems are failing too, corrupted by the same radiation that killed the primary systems. The environmental sensors that monitor air quality, pressure, and temperature begin giving false readings. You can no longer trust the instruments that tell you whether your air is safe to breathe or whether your habitat pressure is holding steady. You're forced to make life and death decisions based on your subjective feelings rather than objective data. Storage batteries develop internal shorts and begin venting toxic gases into your habitat. The battery management systems that are supposed to prevent overcharging and overheating fail, and batteries that once powered your life support now become sources of fire and poisonous fumes. The structural integrity of your habitat begins to fail as thermal cycling and micrometeorite impacts take their toll. Seal failures let precious atmosphere leak away. What starts as a barely perceptible pressure drop becomes an emergency as your habitat slowly deflates like a punctured balloon. Windows develop stress fractures that spiderweb across the transparent aluminum. You watch in horror as tiny cracks propagate across the only barriers between you and the vacuum of space. You try to reinforce them with tape and sealant, but you know it's only a matter of time before catastrophic failure. The stress of constant crisis management begins to affect your judgment. You make mistakes, overlook obvious solutions, or take unnecessary risks because you're exhausted and desperate. Sleep deprivation from constant equipment alarms and the need for frequent repairs leaves you confused and prone to errors. Your hands become clumsy from the constant stress and the effects of radiation exposure. Fine motor control deteriorates, making repairs even more difficult. You find yourself taking longer and longer to complete simple tasks, burning through precious time and resources. These mistakes compound, creating cascading failures that quickly spiral beyond your ability to control. A small electrical fire damages multiple systems simultaneously. A coolant leak contaminates electronic equipment. A failed valve causes overpressure that damages other components. Eventually, you're forced to scavenge parts from your own life support systems to keep other systems running. Your habitat becomes a patchwork of improvised repairs and jury-rigged solutions, held together by hope and ingenuity, but slowly losing the battle against entropy. You start having conversations with yourself, talking through problems out loud because the isolation and stress make it hard to think clearly. You find yourself arguing with broken equipment as if it can hear you, pleading with machines to work just a little longer. The repair logs you keep become increasingly desperate and incoherent. What started as technical notes become stream of consciousness rambling about the hopelessness of your situation. You document each failure, each jury-rigged solution, each desperate measure, creating a record of your slow descent into equipment-induced madness. And through it all, you know that each repair is temporary, each fix is fragile, each working system is one failure away from joining the growing pile of broken equipment that litters your once pristine habitat. The moon is patient, and it will wait as long as necessary for that final, unfixable failure that will claim your life. Let's talk about power. Because on the moon, electrical power isn't just convenience, it's life itself. And generating and storing power on the moon presents challenges that would kill you in ways you might not expect. Solar power seems like an obvious choice for the moon. No atmosphere to block the sun's rays, no weather to worry about. But lunar days and nights each last 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, you'd have abundant solar power. For the next 2 weeks, you'd have none. That means you need massive battery systems to store enough power to last through the 2-week lunar night. These batteries are heavy, complex, and prone to failure in the extreme temperature variations. When temperatures drop to 250 degrees Celsius, most battery chemistries stop working entirely. You need heating systems to keep the batteries warm enough to function. But heating systems consume power, creating a vicious cycle. During lunar night, you're essentially running on stored power with no way to recharge. Every watt becomes precious. You're forced to make impossible choices. Do you run the life support at full capacity and risk running out of power? Or do you reduce life support to conserve power and risk suffocating or freezing? The solar panels themselves are gradually degraded by radiation and micrometeorite impacts. Their efficiency decreases over time, generating less and less power. The lunar dust that settles on them reduces efficiency further, and there's no wind or rain to clean them off. You have to physically go outside and wipe them clean, exposing yourself to radiation and the risk of spacesuit failure. Power converters, inverters, and distribution systems are all vulnerable to the harsh lunar environment. When they fail, entire sections of your habitat could lose power. Imagine your heating failing during lunar night, or your air recycling stopping during lunar day. You have only minutes to restore power before you die. The psychological stress of monitoring power consumption becomes overwhelming. You're constantly calculating how much power you have left, how long it will last, whether you can afford to run the heating or the air conditioning. Every electrical device becomes a potential threat to your survival. Backup power systems add weight and complexity, but they're essential. Generator systems require fuel, which must be brought from Earth at enormous cost. Fuel cells require hydrogen and oxygen, which must be stored under pressure in tanks that could rupture. Nuclear power systems are extremely complex and present their own risks. What happens if the reactor fails or develops a leak? The electrical systems themselves are vulnerable to the moon's harsh environment. Wiring insulation becomes brittle in temperature extremes. Connections corrode or develop high resistance, causing power losses and heat buildup. Circuit breakers and fuses may not function properly in vacuum or extreme temperatures. As your power systems degrade, you're forced to shut down non-essential systems one by one. First goes the lighting in unused areas, then the heating in storage compartments. Eventually, you might be forced to choose between heating and life support, between communication with Earth and oxygen recycling. The constant threat of power failure creates a state of chronic anxiety. You lie awake at night listening to the hum of generators and fans, alert to any change that might indicate a problem. Your sleep is constantly interrupted by power system alarms and the need to check battery levels and charging status. Now let's examine what happens when you get injured on the moon. Because medical emergencies that would be minor inconveniences on Earth become death sentences in the lunar environment. There are no hospitals on the moon, no emergency rooms, no paramedics, no helicopter rescues. You are your own doctor, nurse, and surgeon, operating with limited supplies in an environment where a simple mistake can kill you. Let's say you cut yourself while performing repairs. On Earth, you'd clean the wound, apply a bandage, maybe get a few stitches. On the moon, that cut becomes a potential disaster. Any breach in your spacesuit creates a path for air to escape and lunar dust to enter. The fine, abrasive dust acts like microscopic glass, irritating the wound and preventing proper healing. But the real horror of medical emergencies on the moon goes far beyond simple cuts and bruises. Let's start with something as basic as a nosebleed, a minor annoyance on Earth. that becomes a life-threatening crisis in a spacesuit. Blood in zero or low gravity doesn't drip downward as it does on Earth. Instead, it forms spherical droplets that float and stick to surfaces through surface tension. In your helmet, blood from a nosebleed can cover your visor, blinding you. It can float into your air intake, contaminating your breathing gas. Worse yet, it can be aspirated into your lungs, causing you to drown in your own blood. The blood doesn't clot normally in the reduced pressure environment of your suit. What should be a minor bleeding episode becomes a prolonged hemorrhage that gradually fills your helmet with blood. You can't remove your helmet to clear the blood without exposing yourself to vacuum. So you're trapped inside a gradually filling fishbowl of your own bodily fluids. Infection becomes a major concern because your immune system is already compromised by radiation exposure and the stress of living in an artificial environment. The lunar dust that inevitably finds its way into wounds contains no organic matter, but it does contain sharp-edged particles that create persistent irritation and prevent proper healing. Simple bacterial infections that your body would normally fight off easily can become life-threatening when your immune system is weakened. A small cut that becomes infected can progress to sepsis within days. And without antibiotics, sepsis is often fatal. The limited supply of antibiotics in your medical kit means you have to ration them carefully, using them only for the most serious infections. The closed environment of your habitat becomes a breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The same pathogens circulate repeatedly through the air recycling system, gradually becoming resistant to the antibiotics you have available. What starts as a minor infection resistant to your first-line antibiotics can quickly become a deadly superbug that doesn't respond to any treatment you can provide. If you need surgery, the challenges are almost insurmountable. There's no operating room, no sterile environment, no anesthesia except what you brought with you in your limited medical supplies. You have to create a sterile field using whatever materials you have available, knowing that any contamination could lead to a fatal infection. The anesthetic drugs you brought have limited shelf lives and can be degraded by radiation exposure. Local anesthetics like lidocaine might not work properly in the altered physiology of the lunar environment. Your cardiovascular system has already adapted to reduced gravity, and drugs might not distribute through your body the same way they would on Earth. Performing surgery on yourself is a special kind of nightmare. Imagine trying to suture a deep laceration on your own arm while wearing a spacesuit, using a mirror for visualization, with limited feeling in your hands due to the bulky gloves. The fine motor control required for surgical procedures is almost impossible under these conditions. If you need abdominal surgery for appendicitis, bowel obstruction, or internal bleeding, the challenges become truly horrifying. You need to maintain sterile technique while working in a pressurized suit or in the contaminated environment of your habitat. You need adequate lighting, but your power is limited. You need assistance, but you're alone. The absence of gravity affects how fluids behave inside your body during surgery. Blood doesn't pool in dependent areas as it normally would. Instead, it spreads throughout the surgical field, making visualization difficult. Irrigation fluids float away instead of draining, creating a mess that interferes with the procedure. A broken bone that would heal easily on Earth becomes a major crisis on the Moon. The low gravity means your bones are already weakened from calcium loss. A fracture that would be minor on Earth could be a complex break that doesn't heal properly. You don't have access to X-ray machines to assess the fracture, so you're reduced to guessing at the extent of the injury based on physical examination alone. Setting and splinting a broken bone without proper orthopedic equipment is nearly impossible. You have to improvise splints from whatever materials you have available, perhaps aluminum struts from equipment or padding from your spacesuit. The splint has to maintain proper alignment while allowing you to continue functioning in your spacesuit. The reduced gravity that caused your bones to weaken also interferes with the healing process. Bones need mechanical stress to stimulate healing and remodeling. Without the constant stress of Earth gravity, broken bones heal slowly and often incompletely. A fracture that would heal in 6 weeks on Earth might take months on the Moon. Dental problems become nightmares in the lunar environment. A severe toothache that would send you to a dentist on Earth becomes unbearable agony with no relief available. The limited pain medication in your medical kit won't last long for chronic dental pain, leaving you to endure excruciating pain with no relief. A broken tooth or damaged filling can become infected, leading to a dental abscess that can be life-threatening. The infection can spread to the surrounding tissues and into your bloodstream, causing sepsis. Without proper dental instruments, you might be forced to attempt self-extraction of an infected tooth using improvised tools. The procedure would be barbaric, using pliers or forceps designed for other purposes, with limited anesthesia, no proper sterilization, and no way to control bleeding or infection. The trauma of self-extraction could damage surrounding teeth and tissues, creating even more problems. Burns are particularly dangerous in the low-pressure environment of your habitat. The reduced atmospheric pressure makes it harder for damaged tissue to heal and increases the risk of infection. Severe burns that damage your skin's ability to regulate temperature become even more dangerous in an environment where temperature control is already challenging. Chemical burns from the various toxic substances used in your life support systems present unique hazards. The cleaning solutions, coolants, and other chemicals needed to maintain your equipment can cause severe burns if spilled on your skin. In a spacesuit, these chemicals can't be immediately washed off, prolonging the exposure and increasing the severity of the burn. Radiation burns from solar particle events or equipment. Malfunctions create wounds that are difficult to treat and slow to heal. The radiation damages the DNA in your skin cells, preventing normal healing processes. These burns often become infected and can progress to deeper tissues, creating chronic, non-healing ulcers, appendicitis, kidney stones, heart attacks. Any serious medical condition becomes a death sentence. You can't evacuate to Earth for emergency treatment. The trip takes days, and you'd likely die en route even if a rescue mission were possible. Even minor medical issues like allergic reactions or food poisoning become serious threats when you can't get proper medical care. A severe allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, can kill you within minutes if you don't have epinephrine available. But epinephrine has a limited shelf life and can be degraded by temperature extremes. If your epinephrine has expired or been damaged, you'll die from an allergic reaction to something as simple as a food ingredient. Food poisoning from contaminated food or water becomes a serious medical emergency when you can't afford to lose fluids through vomiting and diarrhea. Dehydration happens quickly in the dry environment of your habitat, and replacing lost fluids is difficult When your water supplies are limited and contaminated, water might have caused the problem in the first place. The psychological stress of knowing that any injury or illness could be fatal creates a constant state of hypervigilance. You become obsessed with safety, checking and rechecking every action. But the constant stress and anxiety make you more prone to accidents. You second-guess every decision, paralyzed by the knowledge that a wrong choice could kill you. Your medical supplies are limited and can't be resupplied. Once you use your antibiotics, pain medication, or surgical supplies, they're gone. You have to ration medications, using them only for the most serious conditions, knowing that saving them for later might mean enduring unnecessary suffering now. The medications you brought have expiration dates, and many drugs lose potency when exposed to radiation or temperature extremes. The insulin for treating diabetes can be destroyed by freezing or overheating. Antibiotics can be degraded by radiation, making them less effective when you need them most. The isolation means you have to be your own psychiatrist as well. Mental health crises that would be treated with therapy and medication on Earth become internal battles you have to fight alone. Depression, anxiety, and panic attacks can be as deadly as physical injuries when they impair your judgment and decision-making. Panic attacks in a spacesuit are particularly dangerous. The feeling of being trapped inside the suit can trigger claustrophobia and hyperventilation. You might try to remove your helmet to get relief, which would expose you to vacuum and kill you instantly. The anti-anxiety medications in your limited supply won't last long for chronic anxiety disorders. Sleep disorders become serious health problems when they prevent you from getting the rest you need to function safely. Insomnia caused by stress, irregular light cycles, or the constant noise of life support systems leaves you exhausted and prone to accidents. Sleep medications are limited and can't be used regularly without developing tolerance and dependence. Chronic pain from the physical stresses of living in an artificial environment becomes a constant companion. The low gravity puts unusual stresses on your spine and joints. The confined living conditions cause muscle cramps and postural problems. The limited pain medications in your medical kit can't provide long-term relief for chronic conditions. Withdrawal from substances you were dependent on before arriving on the moon can be life-threatening without proper medical supervision. Alcohol withdrawal can cause seizures and death. Nicotine withdrawal, while not immediately life-threatening, can cause severe psychological distress that impairs your ability to make rational decisions. The diagnostic equipment you need to assess medical problems is limited by weight and power constraints. You don't have CT scanners, MRI machines, or even basic X-ray equipment. Blood tests require limited reagents that have expiration dates and storage requirements. You're reduced to clinical examination and guesswork for most medical diagnoses. Laboratory tests that would be routine on Earth become impossible on the moon. You can't check your blood chemistry to assess kidney function or electrolyte balance. You can't culture bacteria to determine which antibiotics will be effective. You can't do cardiac stress tests to assess heart function after chest pain episodes. The telemedicine consultations with Earth doctors are complicated by communication delays and the inability to perform physical examinations or diagnostic tests. The doctors on Earth can provide advice, but they can't examine you directly or order the tests they need to make accurate diagnoses. Their recommendations are based on limited information and educated guesses. Medical emergencies during spacewalks outside your habitat present the ultimate nightmare scenario. If you're injured while outside in your spacesuit, you have to somehow make it back to your habitat before your life support runs out. Perform emergency treatment on yourself and hope you don't die from your injuries before you can stabilize your condition. A spacesuit puncture during a spacewalk means you have seconds to minutes before you lose consciousness from decompression. If the puncture is small, you might be able to seal it temporarily with emergency patches, but you have to do this while potentially injured, in pain, and fighting the effects of decompression. The emergency medical procedures you might need to perform on yourself include inserting chest tubes for collapsed lungs, performing emergency amputations for severe trauma, and even emergency surgery for internal bleeding. These procedures would challenge experienced emergency physicians working in fully equipped hospitals. Attempting them alone, in a spacesuit, with improvised equipment, borders on the impossible. The final, cruel irony of medical emergencies on the moon is that many of them are preventable with proper medical care. A simple infection that could be cured with antibiotics becomes sepsis and death. A broken bone that could be set and cast becomes a permanent disability. A heart attack that could be treated with cardiac catheterization becomes sudden death. You die not from the lack of medical knowledge, but from the lack of medical resources. You know exactly what treatment you need, but you don't have the equipment, medications, or facilities to provide it. You become your own physician, nurse, pharmacist, and coroner, watching helplessly as your body fails despite your best efforts to save it. Let's discuss the unique challenges of working in lunar gravity. Because the reduced gravity that seems like it would make everything easier actually makes everything more dangerous and unpredictable. In 1/6 gravity, your intuitive understanding of physics no longer applies. Objects fall more slowly, but they still have the same mass and momentum. A wrench floating toward you might look harmless, but it can still break bones when it hits you. Your movements become unpredictable. Push too hard, and you launch yourself across the room, potentially crashing into delicate equipment. Try to stop quickly, and you find yourself bouncing and tumbling, unable to control your motion. The Apollo astronauts repeatedly fell and stumbled during their moonwalks, despite being highly trained and physically fit. Working with tools becomes incredibly difficult. The reduced gravity means you can't rely on your body weight to provide leverage. Trying to turn a tight bolt might result in you spinning around the wrench instead of the wrench turning the bolt. You have to learn entirely new techniques for performing simple tasks. Walking becomes an art form. The efficient stride you use on Earth doesn't work on the moon. Your feet barely grip the surface, and it's easy to kick up clouds of dust with every step. The Apollo astronauts developed a hopping, bouncing gait that looked clumsy but was the most efficient way to move across the lunar surface. The reduced gravity affects your inner ear and spatial orientation. You become prone to motion sickness and vertigo. Your brain, calibrated for Earth gravity, can't properly interpret the signals from your balance system. This leads to clumsiness, falls, and misjudgments that can be fatal in a hostile environment. Carrying objects becomes challenging in unexpected ways. While things weigh less, they still have the same inertia. A heavy piece of equipment might be easy to lift, but once it's moving, it's just as hard to stop. You have to relearn how to handle momentum and inertia in the reduced gravity environment. The constant need to adapt to the alien physics of lunar gravity is mentally exhausting. You can never relax and rely on muscle memory or instinct. Every movement requires conscious thought and planning. This mental fatigue accumulates over time, making you more prone to mistakes and accidents. Your cardiovascular system, adapted to pumping blood against Earth's gravity, becomes inefficient in lunar gravity. Blood pools in your upper body, causing facial swelling and reducing circulation to your extremities. This can lead to blood clots, reduced cognitive function, and increased fatigue. Even sleeping becomes problematic in reduced gravity. Your body is used to settling into a mattress under the pull of Earth's gravity. On the moon, you tend to float slightly, making it difficult to get comfortable. Many astronauts report difficulty sleeping due to the disorienting effects of reduced gravity. The psychological impact of living in alien gravity conditions adds another layer of stress. Your brain knows something is fundamentally wrong with your environment, even if you can't consciously identify what it island. This creates a constant low-level anxiety that never goes away. Now, let's explore what happens during a solar storm while you're on the moon. Because space weather events that barely affect life on Earth become potentially lethal on the lunar surface. Solar storms occur when the sun releases massive amounts of charged particles and electromagnetic radiation into space. On Earth, we're protected by our magnetosphere and atmosphere. These same events barely register as anything more than beautiful auroras and minor disruptions to radio communications. On the moon, you take the full brunt of the solar storm with no protection whatsoever. The high-energy particles slam into your body, your equipment, and your habitat with potentially lethal intensity. A major solar particle event can deliver a fatal dose of radiation in just a few hours. The particles are energetic enough to penetrate deep into your body, causing radiation poisoning that begins with nausea and vomiting and progresses to organ failure and death within days or weeks. Your electronic systems are particularly vulnerable to solar storms. The charged particles and electromagnetic pulse can fry computer circuits, corrupt data, and shut down critical life support systems. Imagine your air recycling system failing during a solar storm. When going outside to repair it would expose you to lethal radiation. Solar storms can last for days or even weeks. During this time, you're essentially trapped in whatever shielding you have available, unable to venture outside, even in a spacesuit. Your habitat becomes a prison where you wait to see whether your life support systems will survive the electromagnetic assault. The radiation from solar storms isn't just immediately dangerous. It also causes long-term genetic damage that increases your cancer risk and can affect any children you might have in the future, even if you survive the immediate effects. The genetic damage accumulates with each solar event you experience. Communication with Earth becomes impossible during major solar storms. The charged particles disrupt radio signals, cutting off your only connection to the outside world. You're truly alone, facing a potentially lethal situation with no possibility of advice or assistance from home. Power systems are particularly vulnerable to solar storms. The electromagnetic pulse can induce destructive currents in wiring and electronics, potentially starting fires or causing explosive failures in battery systems. Solar panels can be permanently damaged by the high-energy particles. The unpredictability of solar storms makes them even more dangerous. They can occur with little or no warning, giving you no time to take shelter or secure your equipment. You might be in the middle of critical repairs when a solar storm hits, forcing you to choose between completing life-saving work and protecting yourself from radiation. Let's examine the terrifying prospect of being lost on the lunar surface. Because, in that vast, airless wasteland, getting lost isn't just inconvenient, it's a death sentence delivered with mathematical precision. The lunar surface is a maze of craters, ridges, and plains that all look remarkably similar. There are no landmarks in the traditional sense, no trees, no buildings, no distinctive geographic features that are easy to recognize and navigate by. The harsh lighting conditions, with razor-sharp shadows and brilliant sunlight, make depth perception extremely difficult. Every crater looks like every other crater. Every ridge could be the one you passed an hour ago or a completely different formation miles away. The human brain evolved to navigate in environments with vegetation, water features, and atmospheric haze that provides depth cues, struggles to make sense of the stark, airless lunar landscape. The lighting on the moon creates visual illusions that can be deadly. With no atmosphere to scatter light, shadows are absolute black, and sunlit areas are blindingly bright. The contrast is so extreme that your eyes can't adjust to see detail in both areas simultaneously. A shallow depression that you need to avoid might be invisible in the black shadow of a boulder. The lack of atmospheric perspective means that distant objects appear much closer than they actually are. A mountain that looks like it's just a few miles away might actually be 50 miles distant. You might set out thinking you can easily reach a landmark and return, only to discover that you've severely underestimated the distance. Navigation systems can fail, and on the moon, there are no backup navigation aids. GPS doesn't work on the moon. There are no satellites to provide positioning information. You're dependent on inertial navigation systems, star trackers, and dead reckoning, all of which can be fooled by equipment failures or human error. Inertial navigation systems use gyroscopes and accelerometers to track your movement from a known starting point. But these systems drift over time, and small errors accumulate into large mistakes. A gyroscope that's off by just a fraction of a degree will lead you miles off course over a long journey. Star trackers that use celestial navigation can be fooled by the unusual lighting conditions on the moon. Earth, hanging in the black sky, might be mistaken for a star. The lack of atmospheric scintillation means stars don't twinkle, making them harder to identify. Dust on the sensor can create false stars that lead to navigation errors. Your inertial navigation system depends on knowing your exact starting position. But landmark recognition on the moon is notoriously difficult. If you begin your journey from the wrong coordinates, every subsequent navigation calculation will be wrong. You might think you're heading home when you're actually walking deeper into the lunar wilderness. If you become separated from your habitat or lunar rover during an EVA, finding your way back becomes a race against time with deadly stakes. Your spacesuit has limited life support, perhaps 6 to 8 hours of air, water, and power under ideal conditions. But if you're lost and exerting yourself trying to find your way home, you'll consume your life support much faster. The psychological stress of being lost accelerates your consumption of oxygen and water. Your heart rate increases. You breathe faster and deeper. You sweat more from anxiety. What might have been 8 hours of life support under calm conditions might become 4 hours when you're panicked and desperately searching for your habitat. Every minute spent looking for your base is a minute closer to death. And you can see the countdown to your doom displayed on your suit's life support monitors. The remaining oxygen level, the battery power, the cooling system status, all declining inexorably. as you wander through a landscape that offers no hope of rescue. The lunar horizon is much closer than Earth's due to the moon's smaller size and lack of atmosphere. On Earth, the horizon is about 3 miles away for a person standing at sea level. On the moon, it's only about 1.5 miles away. Objects disappear behind the horizon much more quickly than you'd expect, making navigation by landmarks extremely difficult. Your habitat could be just 2 miles away, but completely invisible from your position if it's behind a ridge or crater rim. You might walk in a circle, coming within a mile of safety but never seeing it. The cruel mathematics of lunar geography mean that being close doesn't count. Only direct line of sight matters. Radio communication can be blocked by hills and crater rims, cutting off your only connection to help. The moon has no ionosphere to reflect radio signals over the horizon as Earth does. If you're in a valley or crater, and your habitat is on the other side of a hill, you might not be able to communicate even if you're relatively close. The radio silence is terrifying. One moment, you can hear the reassuring voices from your base, and the next moment, there's nothing but static. You don't know if it's a communication equipment failure, a problem at your base, or simply terrain blocking the signal. Without communication, you can't get directions, call for help, or even let anyone know that you're in trouble. Even if communication is working, the 3-second delay to Earth means that conversations with ground controllers are awkward and time-consuming. In an emergency situation where every second counts, waiting 6 seconds for a response to each question becomes an eternity. You might be able to hear communications from your base, but they can't hear you due to a transmitter failure in your suit. You listen helplessly to conversations about search and rescue operations, knowing they're looking for you but unable to tell them where you are. It's like being a ghost, able to observe but not interact. The psychological pressure of being lost on the moon is overwhelming in ways that are difficult to imagine. You know that rescue is impossible. There are no search and rescue teams, no helicopters, no emergency services. The nearest help is 250,000 miles away. And even if they could launch a rescue mission immediately, it would take days to reach you. You're completely alone in the most hostile environment humans have ever experienced. Every decision you make could be your last. Do you conserve energy and move slowly, risking running out of power before you find your habitat? Do you move quickly to cover more ground, risking exhaustion and running out of air? The suit's heads-up display becomes a countdown to death. You watch your life support readings decline with each passing minute, calculating how much time you have left and how far you might be able to travel. The math is simple and terrifying. If you have 4 hours of air left and can travel 2 miles per hour, you can cover 8 miles maximum before you die. But that calculation assumes you know which direction to go. If you're walking in the wrong direction, you're using up precious life support while moving farther from safety. Every choice about which way to go is a gamble with your life as the stakes. Panic becomes your worst enemy. The fight or flight response that serves you well on Earth becomes counterproductive on the moon. The urge to run, to move quickly, to do something burns through your limited air supply faster. Making hasty decisions leads to more mistakes and gets you more lost. Your training tells you to remain calm, think rationally, and conserve your resources. But your primitive brain is screaming that you're going to die, flooding your system with adrenaline and making calm thought nearly impossible. You have to fight your own survival instincts to have any chance of actual survival. The terrain becomes your enemy. What looked like smooth plains from orbit are revealed to be covered with rocks, small craters, and unexpected slopes that slow your progress and drain your suit's power. You trip over rocks you couldn't see in the harsh shadows, potentially damaging your suit or injuring yourself. Climbing out of an unexpected crater wall exhausts you and drains your suit's cooling system. The mechanical work of moving in a pressurized suit is much harder than walking on Earth, even in the reduced gravity. You quickly become fatigued, making poor decisions and moving even slower. As your air supply runs low, desperation sets in. You start taking risks you would normally avoid, jumping across crevices, scrambling up steep crater walls, pushing your suit beyond its design limits. The knowledge that you're going to die anyway makes dangerous choices seem reasonable. Your suit's alarms start sounding as life support systems approach critical levels. The constant beeping adds to your stress and makes it harder to think clearly. You might disable the alarms to reduce the psychological pressure, but then you lose awareness of how close you are to death. The low oxygen alarm is particularly terrifying. It means you have perhaps 30 minutes of air left, but it also means your thinking is becoming impaired by hypoxia. You need to make critical navigation decisions at the exact time when your brain is least capable of rational thought. Carbon dioxide buildup makes you feel drowsy and confused. You might sit down to rest, telling yourself it's just for a minute, but the CO2 narcosis makes it harder to get up and keep moving. You fight the urge to lie down and sleep, knowing that sleep means death. The power systems in your suit begin shutting down non-essential functions to conserve energy for life support. Your suit heaters shut off, and you begin to feel cold. The heads-up display dims to save power, making it harder to read your life support status. Even if you do find your way back to your habitat, the experience of being lost on the moon would leave psychological scars that never heal. The knowledge of how close you came to dying alone in the most hostile environment imaginable would haunt you forever. Survivors of near-death experiences on the moon report persistent nightmares, anxiety attacks, and an inability to venture outside their habitat without overwhelming fear. The vastness of the lunar landscape, once inspiring and beautiful, becomes a source of terror and claustrophobia. Every future EVA becomes an exercise in terror management. You check and double-check your navigation equipment, establish multiple backup communication plans, and set conservative limits on how far you'll venture from safety. The confidence and sense of exploration that brought you to the moon in the first place is replaced by paralyzing fear. The other cruel possibility is that you find evidence of your habitat, tracks, equipment, debris, but can't determine which direction leads home. Seeing signs of human presence while still being lost adds a psychological torture to the physical danger. You know you're close, but close isn't close enough. You might find old tracks from previous EVAs, but without knowing how old they are or which direction the person was traveling, they're useless for navigation. The lack of weather on the moon means that tracks can persist for months or years, providing false hope to a lost astronaut. Equipment failures compound the problem. Your suit's navigation system might provide conflicting information, leaving you to choose between equally uncertain options. A malfunctioning compass gives you a bearing that doesn't match your inertial navigation system. Which do you trust with your life? The suit's radio beacon that should help your base locate you might be malfunctioning, transmitting the wrong coordinates or no coordinates at all. You can hear your base calling for you, but they can't pinpoint your location. They might be searching in completely the wrong area while you slowly die just a few miles away. The final cruelty of being lost on the moon is the view. Earth hangs in the black sky above you, beautiful and tantalizingly close. Everyone you've ever loved is on that blue marble, but they might as well be in another universe for all the help they can provide. You're going to die looking at your home, knowing that rescue is impossible despite being visible from your front door. You might spend your final hours trying to send a message to your loved ones, knowing it will reach Earth long after you're dead. The 3-second communication delay means that your last words will arrive as a ghost transmission from someone who no longer exists. The irony is that your body might eventually be found by future lunar explorers, but it will be too late to learn from your mistakes. You become a landmark yourself, a cautionary tale for future generations about the deadly consequences of getting lost on the moon. Your final thoughts might be about the simple things you took for granted on Earth. Being able to walk outside without a spacesuit, breathing fresh air, seeing a blue sky, feeling rain on your face. These basic human experiences become precious memories as you prepare to die in a place where none of them are possible. The lunar surface shows no mercy to those who lose their way. It's a vast, empty desert where north looks the same as south, where every horizon promises salvation but delivers only more desolation. It's a place where being lost isn't just inconvenient. It's a death sentence that comes with a timer counting down in the corner of your vision, reminding you with each breath that you're running out of time in the most hostile place humans have ever tried to survive. Let's talk about the crushing reality of knowing you can never go home. Because the psychological impact of permanent exile on the moon might be the cruelest death sentence of all. Earth is right there, hanging in the black sky above you. So close, you can see the continents and cloud patterns. You can watch storms developing over the Pacific, see the Terminator line moving across the surface as day turns to night. Observe the seasonal changes in the ice caps and vegetation patterns. But you might as well be looking at a painting for all the good it does you. The escape velocity required to leave the moon's surface is about 300 miles per hour. Without a rocket capable of achieving that velocity, you're permanently trapped. And rockets are complex machines with thousands of components that all have to work perfectly in precise sequence. If your ascent vehicle fails, if it's damaged by micrometeorites or solar storms, if any one of its countless systems malfunctions, you're stranded forever. The psychological torture of seeing home but never being able to reach it becomes unbearable over time. You watch Earth rise and set over the lunar horizon every 29 days, knowing that everyone you've ever loved is right there, but completely beyond your reach. It's like being in prison with a window that looks out onto freedom. You can see what you're missing, but you can never touch it. The Earth appears 4 times larger in the lunar sky than the moon appears from Earth. A constant blue and white reminder of everything you've lost. During Earth's night side, you can see the lights of cities twinkling across the dark continents. Each light representing thousands of people living their lives, going to work, falling in love, having children, growing old. All the normal human experiences that are now forever denied to you. You develop an obsessive relationship with Earth watching. You know the orbital mechanics by heart, can predict exactly when and where Earth will appear on the lunar horizon. You watch for specific geographical features as they rotate into view. The boot shape of Italy, the distinctive outline of Africa, the spiral of a hurricane forming in the Atlantic. You begin to recognize weather patterns, tracking storms as they develop and move across the planet. You watch the seasonal changes, see snow accumulating and melting in the polar regions. Observe the changing colors of vegetation as spring turns to summer. These natural cycles that you once took for granted become precious entertainment in your lifeless world. But this constant observation of Earth also becomes a form of psychological torture. You're watching life continue without you. Seasons changing without your presence. People moving on with their lives while you remain frozen in time on the lunar surface. You become a voyeur of your own species, able to observe but never again participate. Communication delays make conversations with loved ones increasingly painful. The 3-second delay in radio transmissions makes natural conversation impossible. You speak, wait, hear a response. Wait, reply again. The rhythm of human conversation, something so basic to our social nature, becomes stilted and unnatural. Simple conversations become exercises in frustration. You can't interrupt, can't laugh at jokes in real time, can't comfort someone who's crying without that agonizing delay. The spontaneity that makes human interaction meaningful is lost, replaced by a formal, stilted exchange that feels more like reading a script than talking to someone you love. Over time, the people on Earth move on with their lives. Friends stop calling as often, finding the delayed conversations too difficult to maintain. Family members get busy with their own lives, and the novelty of talking to someone on the moon wears off. You watch helplessly as your relationships slowly decay, not from lack of love, but from the simple impossibility of maintaining human connection across 250,000 miles of space. Birthdays pass without you. Holidays are celebrated without your presence. Friends get married, have children, buy houses, change jobs. All the milestones of normal human life continue while you remain static on the moon. You receive pictures and videos, but they only emphasize your absence from these important moments. Family members pass away while you're stuck watching from 240 miles away, unable to attend funerals or comfort those you care about. You listen to eulogies over the radio, watch burial services through video links, but you can't hold your grieving relatives, can't participate in the rituals that help humans process loss and grief. You become a ghost to your own family, technically alive but increasingly disconnected from the world of the living. Your name comes up less frequently in conversations. Your opinions are sought less often because you're not dealing with the same daily realities as everyone else. You become a historical artifact, a person who existed but no longer really participates in human society. The knowledge that your body will eventually be buried on the moon, far from any cemetery where loved ones could visit, adds another layer of existential horror. You'll never rest beside your ancestors, never have a grave that friends and family can visit and remember you by. Your final resting place will be in alien soil under an alien sky, where no flowers will ever bloom. The traditional human rituals around death and burial become impossible on the moon. There will be no wake where friends can gather and share memories, no funeral procession to a peaceful cemetery, no headstone for people to visit on the anniversary of your death. You'll be buried in a hostile wasteland where nothing grows, where no one will ever come to pay their respects. The isolation from cultural and religious practices becomes another form of torture. If you're religious, you can't attend services with your community. You can't participate in the rituals and celebrations that mark the passage of time and create meaning in human life. Even if you try to maintain these practices alone, they lose much of their significance without the community context that gives them meaning. Holidays become exercises in painful nostalgia. You remember past Christmases, Thanksgivings, birthdays, and anniversaries, but you can never participate in new ones. You become frozen in the memories of celebrations past, unable to create new traditions or share in the evolving culture of your people. The constant stress of survival leaves little energy for the things that make life meaningful. You can't pursue hobbies, can't develop new interests, can't learn new skills except those directly related to keeping yourself alive. Your existence becomes purely functional. You eat, sleep, maintain equipment, and struggle to survive, but you don't really live. The absence of sensory experiences that define human life becomes overwhelming. You'll never again feel rain on your face, smell flowers in spring, taste fresh fruit, hear birds singing, or feel sand between your toes at a beach. These simple pleasures that billions of people experience every day become impossible luxuries that you can only remember. You can't feel wind because there's no atmosphere. You can't smell anything except the recycled air of your habitat, which gradually takes on the metallic, antiseptic odor of life support systems. You can't taste variety in your food because everything comes from the same limited stores of processed, preserved rations. The textures you can feel are limited to the smooth surfaces of manufactured equipment, the rough fabric of your clothing, and the abrasive lunar dust that gets into everything. The rich variety of natural textures, tree bark, flower petals, flowing water, smooth river stones, are lost to you forever. Even your sense of time becomes distorted without natural day-night cycles, without seasons, without the normal rhythms of human society. Days blend into weeks and weeks into months without meaningful distinction. You lose track of dates, of your own age, eventually of your own identity, as the isolation slowly erases your connection to humanity. The temptation to end your own suffering becomes overwhelming. You have access to methods that would make death quick and relatively painless. Depressurizing your habitat, removing your helmet outside, or simply walking away from your life support. The constant battle against suicidal thoughts in an environment where death is always just one mistake away becomes emotionally exhausting. The philosophical implications of your situation become a constant mental burden. You're forced to confront fundamental questions about the meaning of life, the nature of human existence, and what it means to be truly alone. These aren't abstract philosophical discussions. They're daily reality, as you struggle to find reasons to continue existing in such isolation. You begin to question whether you're still human. Human beings evolved as social creatures, dependent on interaction with others for our psychological health and sense of identity. Prolonged isolation literally changes your brain structure, making it harder to relate to others even if rescue were possible. You might be becoming something else, not quite human anymore, but not yet dead. The lack of physical human contact becomes a form of torture. Humans need touch for psychological and physical health. The complete absence of hugs, handshakes, or any skin-to-skin contact with another person creates a kind of sensory deprivation that affects your mental state. You might find yourself touching objects obsessively, trying to satisfy the biological need for tactile stimulation. You develop elaborate fantasies about returning to Earth, imagining in detail what you would do first, who you would see, what foods you would eat. These fantasies become so detailed and compelling that you sometimes lose track of reality, forgetting for moments that rescue is impossible and that you'll never experience these things again. The fantasies eventually turn dark as you realize their impossibility. You begin to imagine your own death in detail, planning how you would want your final moments to unfold. These death fantasies become a form of mental rehearsal, preparing yourself psychologically for the inevitable end while trying to maintain some sense of control over your fate. Sleep becomes either impossible or your only escape from reality. Some isolated individuals develop hypersomnia, sleeping 12, 16 hours a day as a way to avoid conscious awareness of their situation. Others develop severe insomnia, lying awake for days at a time as anxiety and despair make rest impossible. Your dreams, when they come, are either wonderful escapes to Earth or horrifying nightmares about your situation on the moon. You might dream of walking through green forests, swimming in warm oceans, or sitting around a dinner table with your family. Waking up from these dreams to the gray reality of the lunar surface becomes a daily trauma. Alternatively, your dreams might be filled with equipment failures, decompression accidents, and other lunar disasters. You might dream that you're suffocating, freezing, or slowly dying of radiation poisoning. These nightmares make sleep a feared experience rather than a refuge, leaving you exhausted and afraid to close your eyes. The constant hypervigilance required for survival in the hostile lunar environment prevents your nervous system from ever truly relaxing. You develop a chronic stress response that keeps your body flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, leading to physical and mental health problems that compound your psychological distress. Your personality begins to change in response to the extreme isolation and stress. Traits that served you well on Earth, social skills, empathy, humor, begin to atrophy from lack of use. You might become more paranoid, more obsessive, more prone to talking to yourself or to inanimate objects as you desperately try to maintain some form of social interaction. You develop elaborate routines and rituals as a way to impose structure on your meaningless existence. You might eat meals at exactly the same times each day, perform equipment checks in precisely the same order, or create arbitrary rules for yourself about when and how to perform various tasks. These rituals become obsessions that provide the illusion of control and purpose. The absence of purpose beyond mere survival becomes existentially devastating. On Earth, people derive meaning from their relationships, their work, their contributions to society, their creative pursuits. On the moon, your only purpose is to continue existing, and even that seems pointless when existence is nothing but prolonged suffering. You might try to find purpose by conducting scientific observations, keeping detailed logs, or working on projects that future lunar explorers might find useful. But without the hope that anyone will ever benefit from your work, these activities feel hollow and meaningless. You're creating knowledge that no one will ever use, art that no one will ever see, records that no one will ever read. The gradual realization that your entire life on the moon will be forgotten becomes another source of despair. Unlike heroic explorers of the past whose stories were told and retold, your struggle for survival in isolation will likely never be known to anyone else. You'll die anonymously, and your story will die with you. Even if your body is eventually found by future explorers, They'll only know how you died, not how you lived. The daily heroism of surviving in an impossible environment, the small victories against equipment failures and environmental hazards, the psychological strength required to endure such isolation, none of this will be remembered or celebrated. You begin to lose your sense of individual identity as the isolation erases the social context that defines who you are. Without others to interact with, without roles to play, or relationships to maintain, you become less of a person and more of a biological machine struggling to continue functioning. Language skills begin to deteriorate from lack of use. You might find yourself forgetting words, struggling to form complex sentences, or losing the ability to think in abstract concepts. The sophisticated communication abilities that distinguish humans from other animals slowly degrade when there's no one to communicate with. Your voice, unused except for occasional radio communications or talking to yourself, might change timbre or develop speech impediments. Some isolated individuals develop selective mutism, losing the ability to speak even when communication opportunities are available. The complete absence of cultural stimulation, no music except what you brought with you, no books beyond technical manuals, no art, no entertainment, creates a kind of intellectual starvation. Your mind, evolved to process complex cultural information, begins to atrophy when fed nothing but technical data and survival calculations. You might try to create entertainment for yourself, composing songs, writing stories, or drawing pictures. But without an audience to share these creations with, they feel pointless. Art and creativity are fundamentally social activities meant to be shared and appreciated by others. Creating alone feels like shouting into a void. The anniversary of your arrival on the moon becomes a day of particular anguish as you're forced to confront how much time has passed and how little hope remains for rescue. Each anniversary marks another year of life wasted in isolation, another year further from the person you used to be when you were part of human society. You might try to celebrate holidays or personal anniversaries as a way to maintain connection to Earth culture, but these celebrations become painful reminders of your separation from everything that gave those occasions meaning. Christmas alone on the moon isn't celebration, it's torture. The seasonal changes you can observe on Earth become painful reminders of the natural cycles you're no longer part of. Watching spring arrive on Earth while you remain in the eternal lunar environment creates a deep sense of loss for the natural rhythms that regulated human life for millennia. Your relationship with Earth itself becomes complicated and painful. It's simultaneously your greatest comfort, the only familiar thing in your alien environment, and your greatest source of anguish, because it represents everything you've lost and can never regain. Eventually, you might stop looking at Earth entirely, unable to bear the constant reminder of your separation from humanity. The blue marble that once comforted you becomes too painful to observe, and you turn your back on your home world as a form of psychological self-protection. The knowledge that billions of people are living normal lives just 250,000 miles away while you slowly go insane in isolation becomes unbearable. Their proximity makes your isolation feel even more complete. You're close enough to see them, but forever unable to join them. Some astronauts have reported feeling disconnected from humanity, even during short missions, experiencing a kind of existential crisis brought on by seeing Earth from space. This overview effect, as it's called, can be either transcendent or traumatic. For someone permanently exiled on the moon, It becomes a constant source of psychological pain as the beauty and fragility of Earth emphasizes everything you've lost and will never experience again. Let's examine the final stages. When your equipment fails for the last time, when your supplies run out, when hope finally dies, and you face the inevitable end that the moon has been patiently waiting to deliver. It might start with something small. A valve that sticks, a pump that makes an unusual noise, a warning light that flickers on your control panel. But on the moon, small problems cascade into big ones with terrifying speed. And what begins as a minor malfunction becomes a countdown to your death. Maybe it's your oxygen recycling system that finally gives up after months of struggling to function in the hostile lunar environment. The fans stop spinning with a mechanical sigh that echoes through your habitat like a death rattle. The CO2 scrubbers become saturated, unable to process another molecule of the carbon dioxide you're exhaling with every breath. And the air in your habitat slowly becomes poisonous. You have perhaps hours to fix it, but you've already used all the spare parts weeks ago. The replacement components you need are 240 miles away, sitting in a warehouse on Earth, where they might as well be on another planet. You've been cannibalizing other systems for so long that there's nothing left to steal parts from. You try to jury-rig a solution, your hands shaking as you work, with improvised tools and desperate hope. Maybe you can rebuild the molecular sieve beds using materials from other equipment. Maybe you can bypass the failed circulation pump by manually moving air through the system. But these are the delusions of a dying person. Technical fantasies that can't overcome the reality of cascading system failures. The CO2 levels continue to rise despite your desperate efforts, and your suit's atmospheric sensors begin showing readings that make your blood run cold. 1,000 parts per million. Drowsiness and stuffiness. 5,000 ppm. Workplace exposure limit for an 8-hour day. But you can't leave this workplace. 10, 0 ppm. Drowsiness. Stale air. Increased heart rate, 40, 0 ppm, immediately dangerous to life and health. Your breathing becomes labored as your body tries to get enough oxygen from air that's becoming increasingly toxic. Your thinking becomes foggy, your movements slow and clumsy. You make mistakes in your repair attempts, dropping tools, connecting wires incorrectly, forgetting which steps you've already completed. The irony is that there's plenty of oxygen on the moon. It's locked up in the rocks beneath your feet, in the ice deposits at the poles, even in the thin atmosphere of your habitat. But without functioning life support equipment, it might as well not exist. You're drowning in an ocean of oxygen you can't access, suffocating in a world made of the very element you need to breathe. Or perhaps it's a catastrophic failure that ends your story, a micrometeorite that finally wins the cosmic lottery and punctures your habitat wall, or a solar storm that fries your electrical systems beyond repair. The air rushes out through the hole with a shriek that you feel in your bones rather than hear, the sound conducted through the structure of your dying habitat. You have seconds to get to your spacesuit, seconds to seal yourself in before the vacuum claims you. But your spacesuit is across the habitat, and you're already feeling the effects of rapid decompression. Your ears pop, your saliva boils on your tongue, and you know with crystalline certainty that you're not going to make it. The pressure drops so quickly that your body begins to swell as the dissolved gases in your blood come out of solution. Your skin stretches tight, your joints ache, and every step toward your spacesuit becomes a struggle against your own expanding body. The few feet to your emergency equipment might as well be miles. Or maybe it's the power systems that finally give up. Exhausted by months of struggling to keep you alive in the harsh lunar environment, the lights go out with a finality that chills your soul. The heating stops with a click that echoes in the sudden silence. The air recycling ceases with a sigh of failing motors. You're left in complete darkness and silence, with only the emergency battery power in your spacesuit to keep you alive for a few more hours. The silence is oppressive, broken only by the sound of your own breathing, amplified by the helmet of your emergency suit. Without the constant hum of life support systems, the habitat feels like a tomb, which, you realize with growing horror, is exactly what it has become. You're sealed inside your own mausoleum, waiting for your emergency life support to run out. The cold begins to seep in immediately. Without heating, the habitat's temperature starts dropping toward the ambient temperature of the lunar night, 250 degrees below zero. You can feel the chill creeping through the walls, through the floor, through the very air around you. Your breath begins to fog in the helmet of your emergency suit as the last heat radiates away into the vacuum of space. You try to restart the power systems, working by the dim light of your suit's helmet lamps, but the electrical components have been damaged by the power surge that killed the main systems. Circuit breakers have tripped and won't reset. Fuses have blown and you have no replacements. Battery banks that should provide emergency power are dead, their cells frozen solid in the rapidly cooling habitat. As the end approaches, you face choices that no human being should ever have to make. Do you fight to the last breath, clinging to hope even when hope is gone? Do you try to send a final message to Earth, knowing it will take 3 seconds to get there, and that no one can help you? The communication system might still be working on battery power, giving you one last chance to say goodbye. But what do you say to the people you love when you know you'll never see them again? How do you compress a lifetime of feelings into a few minutes of radio transmission, knowing that by the time they hear your words, you'll already be dead? You might choose to spend your final hours recording messages for your loved ones, hoping that someday a future lunar mission will recover your habitat and find your final thoughts. The recording becomes a kind of secular prayer, a way to feel connected to the living world, even as you prepare to leave it forever. Do you take control of your own ending, choosing the manner of your death while you still have the strength to choose? The spacesuit has emergency systems that could end your suffering quickly and relatively painlessly. A valve that could be opened to depressurize the suit instantly. An override that could shut down the life support systems. The final autonomy of choosing your own moment of death. The physical process of dying on the moon depends on what finally kills you. If it's CO2 poisoning, you might drift into unconsciousness relatively peacefully as the carbon dioxide levels rise and your oxygen-starved brain begins to shut down. You feel increasingly drowsy. Your thoughts become scattered and confused, and eventually you simply stop breathing without ever being fully aware of what's happening. The final stages of CO2 poisoning have an almost narcotic effect. Your brain, desperate for oxygen, begins producing endorphins as a last-ditch effort to maintain function. You might experience a sense of euphoria or peace, a feeling that everything is going to be all right even as your body is shutting down. It's a merciful ending to an unmerciful situation. If it's decompression that kills you, the process is violent and painful. As we discussed earlier, your body swells, your blood boils, and your lungs rupture if you try to hold your breath. The pain is excruciating but brief. You'll lose consciousness within 15 seconds and die within 2 minutes. It's a quick death, but not a gentle one. If it's freezing that finally claims you, the process is slow and cruel. You gradually lose feeling in your extremities as your core temperature drops and your organs shut down one by one. Your muscles become rigid, your joints lock up, and your thoughts become increasingly sluggish as your brain slows down like a computer running out of power. The stages of hypothermia create their own psychological horror. First comes uncontrollable shivering, as your body tries desperately to generate heat. Then comes the paradoxical warmth, where you actually feel hot and might try to remove your protective clothing, a phenomenon that has killed many hypothermia victims who undressed in freezing conditions. As your core temperature continues to drop, your heart rhythm becomes irregular. Your breathing becomes shallow and slow. Your pupils dilate and stop responding to light. Eventually, your heart stops beating, but your brain might continue functioning for several more minutes, aware that death is coming but powerless to prevent it. If radiation finally kills you, from a solar storm or equipment failure that exposes you to your habitat's nuclear power source, the death is both slow and horrible. Acute radiation syndrome progresses through predictable stages that give you plenty of time to contemplate your fate. First comes the prodromal phase: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and fatigue as your body's cells begin to die faster than they can be replaced. This phase lasts for days, during which you might feel better periodically, giving you false hope that you're recovering. Then comes the latent phase, where you might feel relatively normal for days or weeks, while the radiation damage slowly accumulates in your body. Your immune system begins to fail, your hair falls out, and your bone marrow stops producing blood cells. You become anemic, then your blood stops clotting properly. The final phase is manifest illness, where your organs begin shutting down systematically. You bleed internally from damaged blood vessels, externally from any small cut or scrape. Your digestive system stops working, your kidneys fail, and your brain begins to swell from the accumulating damage. Death comes from a combination of infection, blood loss, and organ failure over days or weeks of increasing agony. But perhaps the cruelest irony is that even in death, the moon won't let you rest in peace. Without decay processes, without weather, without geological activity, your body would remain on the lunar surface essentially forever, a monument to humanity's hubris in thinking we could survive in such a hostile environment. Your remains would become part of the lunar landscape, slowly being covered by micrometeorite impacts and cosmic dust over millions of years. The constant bombardment would gradually bury you, grain by grain, until you become just another layer in the moon's ancient geology. Future explorers might find you someday, perhaps centuries from now, when humanity has finally developed the technology to make lunar exploration routine. You would be perfectly preserved, frozen in the position you died in, a snapshot of your final moments that tells the story of early human attempts to conquer the moon. Your habitat would become an archaeological site, studied by future scientists, to understand how the first lunar colonists lived and died. Your personal effects, your notes, your final messages would be catalogued and preserved in lunar museums, artifacts of humanity's first fumbling attempts to live beyond Earth. The final thoughts of someone dying alone on the moon must be indescribably lonely. You're farther from home than any human being has ever been, surrounded by a landscape that has never known life, under a black sky that holds no promise of rescue or relief. You might look up at Earth one last time, that blue marble hanging in the void, and think about everyone you've ever loved going about their lives, unaware that you're taking your final breaths on the gray, dusty surface of the moon. The distance isn't just physical, it's existential. You're dying not just alone, but in a place where life itself is an impossibility. The silence is absolute. No wind to whisper through trees, no voices of other people, no sounds of life or civilization. Just the mechanical sounds of your failing equipment and the beating of your own heart, growing weaker as your body finally gives up the impossible struggle to survive in a world that was never meant for human beings. Your death on the moon would be a testament to both human courage and human limitations. The same species that learned to control fire, that built cities and sailed across oceans, that split the atom and reached for the stars, ultimately cannot escape the fundamental reality that we are creatures of Earth. We are dependent on Earth's atmosphere, Earth's gravity, Earth's magnetic field, and Earth's abundant life for our very existence. We can visit other worlds, but we cannot truly live there. We are explorers and pioneers, but we are also prisoners of our own biology, forever tethered to the world that made us. Your final moments might be spent thinking about the simple pleasures of Earth that you'll never experience again, the feeling of rain on your face, the smell of flowers in spring, the warmth of sunlight filtered through atmosphere, the sound of birds singing in trees, the touch of another human being without the barrier of a spacesuit. These basic human experiences, taken for granted by billions of people, become precious memories as you prepare to die in a place where none of them are possible. You realize that Earth isn't just your home, it's your life support system, and you've ventured too far from it to survive. The irony is that your death might contribute to humanity's eventual success in space. The lessons learned from your failure, the knowledge gained from studying what went wrong, might help future explorers survive where you couldn't. Your death becomes data. Your failure becomes education. Your sacrifice becomes the foundation for future success. But that's cold comfort as you take your final breath on the lunar surface, knowing that you've become another casualty in humanity's long struggle to expand beyond the Earth. You're a pioneer in the truest sense, someone who ventured into unknown territory and paid the ultimate price for the knowledge you gained. The moon doesn't care about your sacrifice or your contribution to human knowledge. It simply reclaims your body, adding your atoms to the ancient dust that covers its surface. You become part of the moon, just another element in its lifeless chemistry. Your consciousness extinguished, but your matter preserved forever in the vacuum of space. So the next time you look up at the moon on a clear night, remember that its pale, serene face is a mask hiding one of the most lethal environments in the solar system. It has watched over Earth for billions of years, and it will continue to watch long after the last human being has drawn their final breath. whether on Earth or on the moon's unforgiving surface. The moon doesn't care about human dreams or human ambitions. It doesn't care about our technology or our courage or our determination to explore new worlds. It simply exists, patient, eternal, and absolutely merciless to any form of life that ventures into its domain. And that's why, despite all our achievements and all our technology, you wouldn't last a day on the moon. Not really. You might survive for a while, sustained by the marvels of human engineering and the stubborn refusal to give up that defines our species. But in the end, the moon always wins. It has to. It's been practicing for billions of years. The silence up there isn't empty. It's full of the echoes of every dream that died in the lunar dust, every hope that froze in the lunar night, every human heart that stopped beating under that black, unforgiving sky. The moon remembers them all, and it's waiting patiently for the next visitor who thinks they can survive where angels fear to tread. Sweet dreams. And maybe, just maybe, appreciate the fact that you're safe and warm here on Earth, protected by 60 miles of atmosphere and a magnetic field that has been keeping us alive since the first spark of life began in our ancient oceans. Because out there, beyond that protective bubble, the universe is vast and cold and utterly indifferent to whether we live or die. The moon is beautiful from here. Let's keep it that way.